I am directionally impaired. But Paris, you know, I like getting lost. If I don't have an agenda and I get lost, you know, or if I have an agenda and I get lost and I go in a totally different direction, it's okay. Actually, one time I had walked all day, as you do in Paris, right? And your feet are so tired. I got on the bus, of course, the wrong direction. And I was so tired, I thought, okay, I'll just stay on the bus and come back. I stayed on the bus. I went to this different part of Paris I'd never seen. And then at the end, the man said, Madame, you have to get off. I said, no, it's okay. I want to go back with you. Okay. So I went back, and then it filled up with a whole bunch of other new people. And there was an elderly man with his, what I assumed was his grandson. And I was so tired, and I was just watching and listening to their back and forth, back and forth. And it came out in a book later, you know, 3 months, you know.
Good.
And it was just because I'd been observing this interaction and seeing where they had come from. Yeah, soak. It's sponge mode.
Well, I have all these other questions, but you know, we've run out of time.
Already? Oh
Yes.
my.
And so but you know what we'll do? We'll have you back, and we'll do some more of this. And that's our interview with Cara Black today.
Thank you, Cara.
Thank
you, Kent and Ella and Carl.
From Cara Black in Paris, we're going to talk about other international authors and things like that, and crime fiction in the rest of the world. What do you think?
Well, I wanted to just continue on with one thing that we were talking about earlier before Cara was on, and that is a translation issue.
Good point.
For people who do write in another language and are able to break into English and be published here, sometimes I wonder if the translations are well done. That was and I think it was Kent's had the same feeling about the Henning Mankell book that we read for our book group at Once Upon a Crime. And that was...
The language felt very clunky. The prose felt very, yeah. It didn't flow.
It didn't at all, as opposed to Stieg Larsson's.
Which we've all read, or at least read
Parts
of.
The girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it was partially translation and partially, I don't even know how you put it. It's
the way he wrote it.
Well,
maybe.
As I was mentioning earlier, I was sort of grossed out by the book that I read, because in that he takes his main character into the restroom, and we get to see the state of his underpants.
TMI.
You know, that's more than I want to know.
Yes,
and I was like, I'm done with this book.
Especially if it doesn't have anything to do with the plot.
It didn't.
I mean, who cares?
How could it?
Well, I don't know, because I didn't know the plot. I haven't read that book, but I can conceive of a plot in which the state of a detective's underwear might have some relevance.
Well,
not
it meant
easily.
that he hadn't had time to bathe, I suppose.
Never mind.
All right.
Talk about other...
But you know, if we could stay on the Scandinavians for just a moment more, because I think it's a very interesting group. You think Peter Hoeg, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Smila's Sense of Snow, which was a huge sensation several years ago.
Yes.
Henning Mankell. Stieg Larsson really isn't quite as dark atmospherically as some of these other guys.
Well, I guess
Arnaldur Indridason, I think, is the guy from Iceland.
Icelandic, yeah.
But they use that darkness that I think we all kind of associate with the
well, the Showall and Walu books are a detective.
They're two detectives, yeah.
But they're pretty dark. So maybe it's something in the water. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's what they say about
Minnesota. Well, that's what they say about us, right?
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing, one more time. One of the things about Mankell that I found very interesting is his books do a lot to dispel that image, that pristine image that we have about Sweden and the social.
Who has?
Henning Mankell. Well, I do. I certainly did before I read Henning Mankell,
okay.
and when I looked at what he was writing, I altered my judgment.
Well, when you realize the kinds of issues, I mean, and he brings in the issues of immigration, you know, those are very interesting. I had no idea that they were having problems like that in Scandinavia.
And so does Larson. I mean, that's one of the things about Stieg Larsson's books. That trilogy really deals with a lot of major issues in the society that we know of as Sweden, and it's not all love and kisses.
Well, so here's a question. If an American writes a book that's set in a foreign land, is it automatically a bigger book?
You mean like Dan Brown?
Like Dan Brown.
Or Ian Fleming.
Or Ian Fleming.
Or Robert Ludlum.
Are those automatically because they are more exotic, or?
I don't think it's an automatic. You take Cara Black, for example. She sets her books in Paris.
But it's very small.
That's right. It's a very intimate look at...
Not the Paris that
most tourists would see.
Of Dan Brown, for example.
So it's more exotic.
And it's not like we've talked occasionally about the high concept. Her books aren't the high concept books like
Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code or the Ludlum books, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, the international thriller, which requires the potential for blowing up the world if the protagonist doesn't solve whatever the crime is. But I can't let all this go without somebody mentioning my favorite Australian writer of all time, Carrie Greenwood. You know, which is a good example of a book that is set in the 1920s, a very small arena. That's the word I was looking for. And just, you know, marvelous books about a marvelous protagonist who set in the 1920s, an emancipated woman who has an Asian lover and doesn't care who knows it, and is a detective, which was in the 20s I suspect was rather unknown. But there are, you know, we've hardly really scratched the surface in terms of how much there is left, and we don't have any more time to talk about those kinds of things.
We're already there.
We are. I know. So that's, you know, you just have to wrap it all up. And then, so I want to thank Cara Black. I want to thank you guys for your input. I'm Carl Brookins, and I hope we'll see you next time. You can get additional information at our website, www.minnesotacrimewave.org. You'll find links there to our previous programs, and you can learn about all the fine books that we've all written, as well as other people. You can subscribe to our occasional electronic newsletter, receive a list of the books we've talked about, and if you want to do that, email us, minnesotacrimewave@yahoo.com. Be sure to mention the number or the name of this program, which happens to be episode 26. We'll see you next time, and as always, read more mysteries.